All right, all of my prayer warriors out there, we're also going to be crusaders and legitimate spiritual warriors. We're going to be talking about how to be angry well today and learning about St. Nicholas and how to whip heretics. So it's going to be fun.
Fun times.
Fun stuff. Does it sound fun, Amanda?
I think it sounds fun.
It is. You know, we, in modern Christianity, we really do need to appreciate the fact that God made all of the emotions, which means they actually have a right and proper place. The problem with anger is not that it's something which came from the devil, because the devil didn't make our bodies. The problem is we don't know how to be angry well. Right. And we turn into little wrathful monsters whenever we use something which God actually gave us to solve problems. You know, you're out there, you're fighting a bear. You're supposed to get a little bit mad. You're a little bit stronger. You're ready to fight the beast and rip his head in half, and you're going to look like Samson, who rips a lion in half by his jaw. Anyways, this is Kingdom of the Logos, and we're going to be talking about belief today. So, thank you for joining me. I'm Pastor J. Dillon Proctor, and there are two others here with me in the studio.
I'm Pastor Amanda Sparrow.
And I'm Pastor Mike Proctor.
And we will talk a little bit about anger. Though that's not really the point of this program. The point of this program is belief. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the adventure of belief. Because our world right now is filled with tons of propaganda which make us not believe in anything. We can look at the world around us and see how much there is that just causes us to lose faith in everything. You think about consumerism and the role that that played in America. This idea that, you know, I need to go out and buy a new car. I need to go out and buy a new cell phone. You know, when we were kids, it was really important to have a cool cell phone. Like having a flip phone, there were so many awesome ways that you could do that. You could flip it shut like your St. Nicholas slamming shut Arius' jaw. Like that was one that we should have been doing in the Christian church that we were not. But it was really important for girls in like the year 2004 to have a pink Motorola Razr.
Razr, yes.
Yeah, like that had to be done. But you know what? When you went out and got your pink Motorola Razr, did that actually make your life complete? Was your life really complete with that?
No, I guess not. I think it made my life complete when my sister got her pink Razr and we no longer had to share a cell phone. I'm kidding. No, I had a blue chocolate, but yes, they did not make our life.
Was cool.
Yeah, they didn't make our life complete. Better, but not complete. Sorry.
The chocolate was super cool. Phones are not as cool as they used to be. Though, we're not going to be ripping on ugly cell phones today, though we could. We're going to be talking about serious things, because the idea that go out and buy a new car, go buy a new phone, new clothes, all this stuff, it feels great for a few seconds, but then it's ultimately not fulfilling. You know, Pastor Mike made a hat. Pastor Mike, he's over there being a little bit quiet right now. Pastor Mike, was it more fulfilling to make the hat or go out and buy the hat?
Oh, for sure, making the hat.
Yeah. But in our culture, we're not taught to do those sort of things anymore. We're told to get online and read through the post really quickly, which a lot of times they're not fulfilling. We forget about them. And this trains our brain that says all the things that you get excited about, they're not really real. They don't have any deeper meaning. It's just propaganda to get you to disbelieve in everything. We look at our world right now. We see how many times politicians say one thing, they do something else. We also see this with celebrities and like cultural heroes, if you could even call them that, just icons of our culture. It's become so common that someone will say one thing but then do something else that we're just all surprised when somebody actually is the guy you actually suspect them to be. You know, you look at a lot of celebrities, and a lot of people really like Paul Rudd. He's kind of popular now. I think he plays Ant-Man. What are some other characters that Paul Rudd plays?
Ant-Man, he's in the new Ghostbuster movie. He was in Friends, the last season or two of Friends. The love interest for Phoebe.
Really?
Yeah, like you forget he's been around a while. Like he's been acting for quite a while.
Has he ever punched a heretic like Santa Claus?
I don't think so. He usually plays more lovable characters. He probably has gotten punched, but no, I don't.
But how much more lovable can you get than St. Nicholas?
Yeah, seriously.
That's true.
We're going to be comparing St. Nicholas in our next segment. Two very different images of him. But back to the whole point here. And I was on Paul Rudd for a second. I don't even remember where I was going. Back to unbelief. But yes. we're trained to believe that none of the characters in society, they really mean anything. You know, we used to talk about how someone's word meant something, and you hear like the older generations talking about standing by your word really needs to have value. Well, that's actually the product of a culture that believes in God. It believes in, you know, character and virtue and higher ideals. Because your word means something, and it creates a society where there's a lot more rich meaning in everything. But our modern world, it wants to soil heroes, to water things down, to teach you that, public figures, they don't have any fulfilled promises. Everything is just ugly, and everything is just a sensation. Even things like pornography teach you that meaningful, adult relationships in marriage between a man and a woman, those things are now reduced to something which is a sensation and ultimately hollow. Like, our world is perpetually planting in our brains things which are propaganda to make you disbelieve, to ultimately take you to a place where you believe in nothing, including yourself. You don't believe in life itself, and it separates you from God and sets you on the path of hell. We talked in the past about 2 Corinthians 4:4, where it says, the God of this age is blinding the minds for the unbelief. Wherefore, to negate the radiating illumination of the glory of the gospel of Christ, who is the image of God. And that's my translation. I got some of the words out of order there in the end. Y'all forgive me. The devil and his demons, the spirit of the age, they want you to live in unbelief. Unbelief in everything. Just misery, because that prepares you to be conquered really easily by everything and any passing army. Well, God came for something totally different. And we're today going to be talking about belief. And we're going to begin with John chapter 3, verse 16. We're going like to the quintessential Bible verse. We're going there today. Pastor Mike, are you ready to go there?
Yes.
Are you ready to punch Arius?
Yes.
You ready for that? Okay.
Always.
Okay. Always. See, this is the attitude we've got to have. If you're out there listening to this and we want to hear from you, send me your thoughts, comments, and questions. We got to learn. We got to learn how to be St. Nicholas, who can, at one hand, save innocent people from being executed. Check out this really crazy picture by Russian painter Ilya Repin. This is a real painting. This is not a photograph. It looks like a photograph. It's a painting. We got to learn how to believe. St. Nicholas can do that because he believes. He's not working out his own wrath. When he punches Arius in the face, and he should, he's doing it because he actually believes in something. And in John chapter 3, verse 16, we get as follows. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That operative word there is believe. Now, I've got pulled up in my notes and screenshots and things here from Bible Hub, their Greek English interlinear. And we can see right here, I've got my mouse cursor hovering around this picture. You can see the word pisteuon. Now, this is the Greek word for belief. It's a very, very important word. And it's a version of pisteuo. And it means to believe, to have faith in, to trust in. This is such a powerful word in our world. There's a lot of things in our world which want us to have no belief in anything, not to put faith in anything, and not to have trust in anything, just to be uncertain perpetually all the time.
It also means to be loyal. And so there is this whole understanding when you look especially at St. Nicholas where, or the story as it goes about St. Nicholas, especially when it comes to Arius, that there was this belief and there was this loyalty to Christ Jesus and who he was. And so we see, him as, it's often told that he slaps Arius, who is a heretic. And this is not just some, low-level, pastor. This is someone at a bishop. Making, a bishop making statements and corrupting the gospel message of who Christ Jesus is along the way. And so, he is willing to show this loyalty, this faith, and act upon it. And really, of course, not being there, it's hard to say, but I do believe this is one of the defining moments. We often talk about, St. Nicholas or Santa Claus in many ways and associating with the secular side of being the patron saint to children, and there's a story that goes behind that, and of course there are many other things, but really and truly contending for the gospel is what we see St. Nicholas doing.
Yeah, and he believes. And by the way, when I said the word bishop earlier, I was referring to Nicholas.
Yeah, St. Nicholas.
When it comes to Arius, Let's not even capitalize his name. This is, when I write scripture, I do capitalize, obviously, the names of God, but I also capitalize, pronouns for God. I'm one of those guys that do that. I also capitalize words like Bible, biblical, and scripture. But when it comes to the devil and Satan, I do not capitalize those words. It's like my low-key mockery. It's not a typo when you read my sermon notes. Anyone at Jolton Church of the Nazarene, I do it on purpose for spite. It is willful spite against the devil. The same thing for Arius. So the word belief is really important because we need to be people to aspire to great things. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to believe in the good Christian heritage we have. I'm here to say, let's dress up like the Pilgrims and let's go build a ship. And we're going to take a 180-ton merchant vessel to Antarctica and build something awesome. Like, let's do it. I'm here for that. But belief is so essential to actually having so many things in life. There's a lot of language that I want us to look at in Scripture today. And the next story I want us to go to is actually out of Matthew chapter 8, where we find the centurion. Now, Jesus has done a healing in this chapter, and Jesus is out ministering. He's rolling with it. If you've watched The Chosen, you can imagine that version of Jesus if you like, but there's really just one version of Jesus in truth. He is God the Son, God the Father.
Don't make me bring
God the Holy Spirit. There is one Trinity.
Yeah.
We don't have multiple versions of Jesus in reality, or God. But if you want to have the imagery of The Chosen in your mind, please do. But Jesus is out doing his ministry, and a centurion comes over to him. And he is asking that Jesus would heal his servant. And a conversation happens between them where this centurion says, look, you don't even have to come. If you would just say the word, it'll happen. I'm a man of authority. I know that if I say something, someone goes here, someone goes there. I understand the power of a word and a command. And he said, all you've got to do is say the word and he will be healed. And Jesus is really impressed by this. He says, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. In fact, this is pretty awesome. God looks at one of his creatures and is like, hey, this creature gets it. I like it. He's good. I like it. And then he eventually goes on to say, there'll be people in the house of Israel who end up in hell, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth because they don't believe. And our verse that we're going to look at now on the word belief is in 8:13. So Matthew 8:13, it says, and Jesus said unto the centurion, go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. Also another cool English word, selfsame. Because of the belief of this centurion, his servant is indeed healed. And this is a really, really awesome story. And there's a lot that happens here that's unseen. You even think about the mystery of why Jesus is so impressed by the recognition of authority and kind of the power of a command. That's pretty mysterious. It's a little bit of a thing unseen. You kind of got to dig behind there. But then faith itself, belief, these are things that are in the unseen realm. Pastor Amanda, I'll just let you respond to this story and the power of belief and the beauty of this in Matthew 8.
Well, I think kind of like what Pastor Mike was talking about in this idea of loyalty or trust. And as you mentioned, this word belief, it really is something so intrinsic to human nature. We want to trust something. We have to trust something. As much as our world tries to give us different answers to who we are and our place in the world, all of us have, as you've kind of said before, we're all religious in some way or another. We all believe in something, and whatever we call it, we try to find a solid place to stand on. And so for the centurion to come to Jesus and be like, I understand how the world works. I get kind of the basic building blocks of the universe is belief, is trust, is power. But what the centurion then is specifically asking is, I see the belief and trust in the world, but I understand it only has its truest meaning. The best foundation is in Jesus, is in the Christ. And because I'm sure the centurion, being somebody of power and authority and affluence, would have had money and the ability to get a physician or even his own religious leaders, assuming that he wasn't Jewish. As a centurion, I would imagine he's probably not Jewish. But, he could have brought in people from his gods or his ideologies to come in. But he recognizes that this kind of trust that's out in the universe is really only going to be reproducible or real, something that he can stand on time and time again if it is in the nature of Christ and who Christ is. And I think that's where Jesus looks at that and says, okay, you're getting it because the rest of the people in the crowd, they're still trusting in all these worldly things, even if they have kind of the facade of being religious, like the sacrificial system or going to Jerusalem for festivals. They're still participating in these different things, but they're failing to see where this trust is supposed to be taking them. Right. And this is where I think we see that trust, that faith becoming belief, which includes trust and faith, but it's being put into action. And that's where we see in the centurion, and also in John 3:16, where Jesus is telling, again, a teacher of the law, someone who should already know the answers to the questions, and be like, you've got all the building blocks. I'm going to show you how you put them together and actually build something better.
Yeah, and you brought up something really important. There is a natural law of how our biology works, and belief is actually part of that. Mm-hmm. We're hardwired to put faith in stuff. But the problem is when you put faith in anything other than God, when you do pervert that, when you twist it. And there's a lot of people who say, I'm not religious. It's not fully true. They actually believe in something. They still put on clothes in the morning. They have motivations. Maybe it's so simple as I just want to indulge my own desires, or maybe it's malicious, like the serial killer who says, I want to kill people. But they have something driving them, and that's really the course of belief they're going through their veins. And for the centurion here, he realizes that all the other stuff in the world, it really is ultimately empty. All the other things that you can put faith in, they're not giving a return. There are a lot of sorcerers that go around. There are pagan sorcerers. There are Jewish sorcerers that roll around. Mm-hmm. And some people accuse Jesus of being that. They'll ultimately end up accusing, some others of that too in the church and things of that nature over the course of time. But Jesus is legitimately God incarnate. How much of that the centurion knows, we can only speculate, but he knows enough that is the place to put the faith. Pastor Mike.
I think we see also when Jesus heals many, he comes with this statement, go, your faith has made you well, or your faith has saved you, so to speak. Even though it's the work of God, it is that belief and that trust that is, exercised, and whether it be the blind man crying out, Son of David, have mercy on me. It is this action that goes out and seeks God, and that faith and that loyalty that Pastor Amanda was referring to. This is the Christmas or the Advent season, and I like to watch some Christmas movies. And if I think it's the C.S. Lewis writing that a movie is based upon, The Christmas Candle. This is one of the best movies to watch during. It is a British. It has that lady that sings, Susan Boyle, in it, which is known as more of a singer rather than an actor, but nonetheless she's in here. But the thing that is so powerful about this movie is how people, I don't want to put any spoilers out there, but it needs to be watched because people pray. But sometimes people pray without faith. Right. And it talks about the faith, the belief of knowing that when you pray and believe that God is at work in that belief. And so I highly recommend somebody to watch that movie to kind of grasp the understanding there.
Sure. Yeah. And Max Lucado is the author of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Yeah, Max Lucado.
But with the Christmas candle, there actually is a miraculous candle, kind of, that people believe in. But the movie is trying to convey and to communicate to you the purpose of belief itself. The premise of belief really matters, and it really matters that you believe in God. Like, belief has to be oriented towards something, and the devil comes and attacks this in two ways. And I'm not here to give like the cheap platitudinal, like just believe in something. No, you actually have to believe in God, but you also have to accept the value of belief. Because when we look at the biblical stories, here's where we get into our next scripture, Hebrews 11. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So much of life is things not seen. Like everything we do as people has elements to it that are not seen. You can't write down on paper, and they're really what give things meaning. Like, I'm going to have a birthday party for my little niece tomorrow. You can write down the data, like so many children come in, or, something like that. That doesn't really tell you what goes on. I went up to my grandmother's house in Springfield a couple of days ago, and one of my cousins had brought over a bunch of pictures, and these are some relatives I only get to see a few times a year, and I'm looking at some of the kids that my cousin Katie has, and I'm looking there at all these kids, and there's so much joy in seeing these kids. And I understand that there's more to life than just like a living organism that's in some cloth and something like that. No, it's kids. They're all dressed up together. They've got in their Snoopy costumes. They're taking pictures for Christmas. And there's a joy to that you can capture in a picture a little bit, but you can't explain it with words. There is something unseen about that is fantastic and beautiful. And it actually really takes a version of belief to even understand that. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately to understand that we're made in the image of God, to really aspire to great things, you have to have a premise of belief and acknowledge it. Again, we're going to believe in something. You can pervert that and deny it, but you have to consciously acknowledge that and then direct that in a good direction. Our modern world, it soils us with propaganda telling us everything's a sensation. Everything that you try to believe in, public figures, movies, they all come back and they're meaningless. There's a reason why we have so much stuff being deconstructed in our society, and not just things that need to be, but just everything. They want to deconstruct belief. And when I say they, I mean the devil in hell and his demons. They want people to be miserable and trapped in ugliness rather than aspiring to great heroes, looking back at our heritage and seeing wonderful men and women that came before us, looking back at people like St. George. He goes and slays a dragon and then converts everybody in Libya. Like, that's awesome. We should have toys of St. George to give our kids. We should want our kids to be like the pilgrims who go on their voyage into the unknown. We have so many awesome people. We should have hairbrushes named after Vivia Perpetua. You want to look good when you go and see the Lord? Now, of course, she's a martyr, but we should teach those stories to our kids because they're amazing. Amazing stories. We should believe in the great heroic figures, in the virtues and the beauty, and ultimately in Christ Jesus, because God is the Word. He underpins creation. And to believe in the good, the true, and the beautiful, it does draw us to God. And when we call on the name of Christ Jesus and we see him as the Lord and Master, that takes us to so much a better place. This segment's gone a little bit long. Pastor Mike, do you have any final thoughts on this before we...
Well, I think, belief is just one of those things that is so, it's more than a word. It's hard to describe, but it has so much really power that is, very much a part of that. So whatever you believe in, it does shape and mold you.
Right.
And so, that's why we need to study our scriptures and believe in God. Amen. And that's where we need to believe. But people are going to believe in something.
That's right.
And that's why we as pastors, we preach the word and stay biblically grounded.
We need to understand in Christianity nothing as a proper noun, because nothing is a powerful thing. The void in Genesis is not neutral. Nothingness is not neutral. Nothingness is hell. Nothingness is hungry. It eats you. If you leave a house alone, it'll rot. If you leave a car alone, it will deteriorate. If you don't feed your dog, he'll die. Nothingness is a hungry thing. And there's a lot of people who believe in the nothingness, and it consumes them. It rots them. It's terrible. It's miserable. All right. Y'all ready to move on to the next segment? We're going to be playing a game at the end of our show today, Hot, Not, or Sanctified, with some fun snacks that I have come up with. We'll see how creative of an imagination I have around Advent, the birth of Christ. But before we get to that, we're going to have a very serious conversation about anger, rage, and some Proverbs and Old Testament scriptures. So thank you for joining us here at Kingdom of the Logos. All right, welcome back. Hope you're ready to be a crusader for Christ who understands how to be St. Nicholas and not Ivan the Terrible. So thank you for joining us. Again, this is Kingdom of the Logos. And for our next segment, we're going to be talking about a couple of lessons that we can learn from some painters of old. And particularly, we're going to be looking at Ilya Repin. He was a Russian painter who lived in the 1800s, and he painted a lot of very stunning, realist works of art. I mean, these paintings, they look so real, you're going to think that they are. And the first one we're going to talk about, because they have a moral lesson. The reason why we're talking about these is they teach us something very serious and severe about how the world works and how we have to be masters over our spirit and not just people who are led astray. A good scripture to get us started on this is Proverbs 25:28, which reads, "He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls." Having control over your own spirit is very much about discipline, having a strong countenance. God gives this wisdom to Cain in Genesis 4, verses 6 and 7. And Cain does not have a strong spirit. He doesn't have a strong countenance, and a lot of problems creep in. But we have to be better than that. We have to be stronger than that. So let's talk about some of these pictures. The first thing that we're going to talk about today is this painting by Ilya Repin, and it's of Ivan the Terrible. And I'm not going to lie, this is one of the most stunning and powerful images I think I've ever seen. Because what you find here is Ivan the Terrible. He was a czar in Russia. He was a royal. He was a prince before that. He had a royal title, but he basically declared himself czar at a certain point. And he lived back in the 1500s. And there was an incident that happened. Ivan got into a dispute with his son-in-law, with his daughter-in-law. And things went south. And eventually, and it went really sour. His daughter-in-law was wearing some stuff in the court that Ivan did not think was appropriate one night, and he got into a dispute with her, and she ended up having a miscarriage. And then his son came over to confront his father, and Ivan the Terrible, he hit his son in the head with kind of a spiked scepter sort of thing that he had, and it fatally wounded his son. It beat his head open, and he bled to death. And immediately, the regret seeps in, and this is what happens to us. We often are tempted to be people of rage, of wrath. And that, again, we can cue James 1:20 here, which reads, "The wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God." Well, for Ivan, that rage immediately went to regret. And this picture that we have here, it shows us so much. You look at the look on his face of a father who has killed his son and the immediate regret of it. This is a very powerful, powerful image from history. This is a warning that Ilya Repin is sending to us. There's a whole sermon in this. Again, it's a sermon on James 1:20. It's a sermon on, really, Genesis 4, that you see Cain kill Abel. It's a sermon on Proverbs 25:28. And it is so powerful to see this. It's so detailed. It looks so real. The tragedy that we find here, the terror of the father's face. And I just wanted to bring this kind of to our attention to talk about. In our modern world, we are littered with propaganda everywhere, and we're not telling there are a lot of stories that are totally true. We kind of live in this world where morality is whatever you wish it to be. Your emotions are whatever you want them to be. There's no larger transcendental value in emotions and cost of things. Like if you just want to be full of rage and you want to just, walk out on your job, then do it. If you don't want to do your homework, don't do it. We gotta have this idea that there's no consequences to emotions. But that only really works in fictional stories put on the TV. In real life, there's a huge cost to faulty emotions, and they destroy you. And you see in this picture a man utterly destroyed by giving into rage when he should not. And there's a lot of history to learn about Ivan the Terrible, but for today we're just going to look at this picture. Thoughts on this?
I think one of the things is self-control that needs to be, practiced and be something that we seek to put into our life in all areas, and certainly when things are not as we would like, let's just look at road rage in our own very culture today, where we see that going, where it often escalates to where we see people who regret what they've done. And so we have to learn self-control. We have to learn, to not overreact to certain situations. And that's what we see going on in this picture. I think in this picture where we just look at the Father's eyes, it just does something to you that there's no way to roll back time. And if you could only roll it back for a few minutes, a few moments, and it hasn't. And now the action that has taken place in rage is going to have a terrible effect throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah, it certainly does. Amanda, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think you get to become known as Ivan the Terrible for and have a lot of self-control. So obviously something happened in his life for a while now. At least in this picture, he seems kind of older. So that people are noticing a pattern in his life, and it has come to such a tragic end. And I think the other thing is, there are things worth being angry. And I think that's the response a lot of people have to these extreme outbursts of anger and inappropriate anger is just to be like, oh, nobody should be angry. And if you argue passionately, you're just being angry. We kind of swing the pendulum the other direction. No, there are things worth being angry about. And I mean, there are things worth getting physically worked up about. And I am not saying it is okay to go hurt people, obviously, but there are times when we do need to get up,
right,
stand up, and do something about something.
Right.
But there is also a way in which we can do it that does not cause more harm.
Right.
And I think this Sunday is the candle, or the second Sunday in Advent is generally the candle of peace. It is the theme of peace. And what we see often in the gospel, in the story of God, even before the Gospels, but just how God works, God always brings peace, but sometimes there's disruption when that peace comes. Not
Sure.
because God is a God of wrath, of this kind of arbitrary violence and destruction, but when peace comes, those systems of destruction get destroyed themselves. And so we definitely see in Ivan just pure destruction, pure just this lostness to pain and chaos. And when we bring in, I think, our second story of St. Nicholas, we're going to find, yes, there's some disruption, there's some disorganization, as we've talked about him slapping Arius, but the means and the ends by which Nicholas goes about are quite different than what we see right now here in Ivan.
Sure. Mike?
Well, I think often if we just place this in its context and how there's such an overreaction there, mm-hmm. and he ends up with the name of Ivan the Terrible. But let us look, to last century when someone who carried a big stick and used it, and that'd be Walking Tall and Buford Pulser. And he has been, made a hero because he uses this stick in a way to bring about justice, and there is a certain amount of self-control that he uses, and I think he's using it for good, to stomp out evil. And so when you compare these two stories, you can see the pettiness of hitting someone with a big stick that you love so much. But then in some of, I guess we can call it modern day, there's been several movies even in this century, I think, about the story. But and again, that's Hollywood's version, but it's somewhat accurate to the man.
Well, Buford Pulser had Pulser, no L. It's a weird name. Mm-hmm. It's spelled strange.
It's Pusser, I think.
Yeah, it's spelled like Pusser. But
it's kind of like the street in Nashville. We call it Demumbrium, but if you look at it, it's Demon Brewing.
Yes,
Demon. But I don't know how that happens. But Buford Pulser.
But all right, so what you just articulated, Pastor Mike, is thought in terms of virtue as opposed to thought in form of formulas. If you think in terms of formulas, you're going to say, oh, well, you don't need to carry a stick because that's bad. But you see what Buford Pulsar does, very different than what Ivan the Terrible does. And the difference is not the methodology so much as it is the principle behind it, the primary expression of it. And we are going to get to St. Nicholas in a second, but I want us to pause and take a little detour to another Ilya Repin painting, which is stunning. In fact, if you're looking at this online, you're probably going to think this is a photograph. It's not. It's a painting from the 1800s, and it looks insanely real. So this is titled A Religious Procession Through Kursk Province, and that's me trying to say Kursk as someone who's not Russian and doesn't speak any Russian, or very little Russian. So what we find here in this painting is a couple of things. This also is very much a sermon. Jesus is very critical when people don't want to have little children brought to him. He says, bring the little children unto me. He's very critical of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, who don't want Jesus to be with sinners. He says things like, the healthy don't need a doctor and things of that nature. I'm here to heal the sick, not the healthy. But what you see happening here is a group of priests. They're carrying some religious icons, some valuable things that they've got within the church. You also see some officials there from some sort of Russian police that are there guarding all this, making sure everything's in order. And then to the side, you've got some children and people who are crippled, some people suffering various afflictions and maladies, trying to gather the attention of the priests, trying to gather the attention of really the crowd, and they're totally ignored. They're ignored, and the police are basically riding over them. And one of the statements that Ilya Repin is making here, and he himself, he was critical of the church. And in our modern world, we're kind of trained that if someone's critical of the church, they're unchristian and they hate it. No, actually, people who really love the church are oftentimes very critical of the church. It's because of their love of the church. He was Russian Orthodox. His mother was very religious, and she passed the faith on to him. And the sermon that we see being preached here in this message is all the people who claim that they're kind of the representatives of justice. They're here to make sure that everything's in order. The people here who are meant to carry the gospel on their shoulders, they don't even pay attention to where the real problem is. Mm-hmm. Oh, they think that they're calling out the problem. And this was painted, I think, in 1871. I may have the date for this one wrong. I think I'm confusing that with the date of another painting. Just disregard that date. But it's painted about that time. You're seeing a lot of festering in Russia. There's about to be a huge revolution, and things are going to go from a place of real destitution to a place of mass murder very quickly. It's going to go from a very bad place to a very hellish place. And there were a lot of people legitimately ignoring problems while pretending to call out problems. Mm-hmm. And this painting here is really drawing attention to that, and it's phenomenal, the sermon in it, and I just basically wanted to share it with us. So we'll go past that one really quickly, unless anyone really needs to talk about it.
I just think that this is something where when we're talking about belief and also the disbelief in our world, we do have to do a little bit of some differentiation where we look at some things, like you're saying, when we call out problems, we're not calling people to disbelief. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're not asking for us to burn all of it down. But there are times where we do stand in the midst of the struggles of our world, and especially as leaders within our religion, where we do have to say, this is what's wrong. We're not denying our faith. We're not running from God. Actually, we're running towards God. And again, as I said earlier, sometimes peace calls for a little disruption.
And that's what this painting basically is.
And I think that's what we need to hold that close to us as we go into the issues of our world, when we communicate with people about the issues of our world, is there are times for discussions and fights and disagreements, and we need to have them. But that does not mean we have abandoned our beliefs. No. And I think, because this makes me a little angry. It's hit a little bit of a raw nerve, so I might be going on a tangent. But like, I had as somebody in leadership tell me, "Oh, your generation just doesn't believe in anything." I was like, and I didn't respond because there was no way I was going to respond kindly. I was just like, and walked away. But what I wanted to say was, no, we believe. We're just calling you out.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's, again, a little bit of my soapbox, but I think that's something we do have to come to. This picture, what it shows us, is the people who should be calling the children and the poor and the crippled and the hurting to these icons, because that's the idea of these icons. If you're near the story of the saints, then their story crosses time and space, and something as simple and as dead as bone can still speak life. This is the idea that you should be calling these people towards it, and instead you're pushing them away. This is not belief. This is not what is true and right and good and beautiful. And I think this is where we have to hear again and again that there needs to be some disruption in order for there to be peace. And we need to get angry about some things, and we need to disagree on some things, or we're never going to move to the place where God has called us.
Amen. And that's where we get to our point that there actually is an appropriate role for anger. We're going to look at that. But real quickly, just to prove Ilya Repin's point, when he put out this painting, there was a controversy because one of the priests is painted in a posture that looks drunk. And people were unhappy about that, but there was nothing said about how the poor and afflicted looked. They ignored the children to talk about they didn't like the posture of the priest, which was all done on purpose, and thus proved his point. Like, talk about providence, just showing you things. Pastor Mike.
I think a lot of times pictures, we pick out the things we want to see. And so, even I'm sure there are some people, even when I made reference to the motion picture of Walking Tall, but you have to understand that the man did not carry a gun because he opposed violence, but because of the horrific problem with drugs and things that were killing people. He come to action to try to bring about some type of justice. And I think that is one of the reasons we see many people saying, looking at him and saying, this is what we want. Not necessarily should we want to go see someone get hurt, but there has to be this understanding that people need justice. We're going to find true justice in Christ Jesus.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Proverbs chapter 26, verse 27 says, whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If somebody rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. And it's a great proverb, Proverbs 26. Proverbs 25 and 26 go great together. And here in the conversation we're having right now, we do have to put our emotions in the right place. You can see Ivan the Terrible. He's definitely afflicted. He dug a hole and he fell in it. It was bad. But now I want us to talk about St. Nicholas a little bit. And I'm just going to let Proverbs 26-27 sit on itself for time purposes. And I want to get over to Ephesians chapter 4-26, and then we'll come back and talk about this picture of St. Nicholas. Ephesians 4:26 says, be angry, but do not sin. Let no sun go down upon your wrath. So be ye angry and do not sin. So what this is telling us is that anger itself is not the problem. The problem is most of us don't know how to be angry well, and we naturally don't. We're naturally little monsters or big monsters. We're either petty tyrants or gross tyrants when we get angry. That's how we naturally are. But God made that emotion for a reason. He made it for a reason. And in Christianity, we understand that the journey through the travail, through the valley of the shadow of death, that difficult adventure which is life, the way that we overcome that is by going through the problems, not around. And all disagreements are not bad, all debates are not bad, and even all anger is not bad. God actually has a place for that. And St. Nicholas, you get two images here. The first image that we've been putting around all day, there was a heretic Arius, and we lowercase his name. We mock him and give him scorn. Just like Elijah does in 1 Kings 18, where he mocks and scorns the prophets of Baal. We're mocking and scorning Arius for denying the divinity of Christ. And that some people will say, oh, you're oversimplifying it, whatever. If you want to defend Arius, then do. That's on you.
Good luck with that one.
Good luck on that one. Arius is a loser, and St. Nicholas is awesome. St. Nicholas punches him in the face.
I love it because generally when we talk about it, it's like a slap, like a gentleman slap, like how dare you? And this is just full on like WWE slam. Like I am enjoying this picture 1,000 times over.
I am too.
he's got his full weight. Like he's planted and he's ready for that. That is excellent.
It is awesome. I didn't know, people draw superheroes in like super tight clothes so you can really show off like the muscles. It's actually easier for kids to draw superheroes in tight clothes. That's another reason why they do that too. But also you can really like mesh out the form. You like know exactly how their posture is and everything. That's hard to do in robes. That's really hard to do in bishop robes. But they nailed it, man.
They got it.
Somehow they managed to communicate a firm posture in bishop's robes.
And a really weak posture on areas.
I know. He's like...
He's just like...
Yeah.
It is great.
If you could do that again on camera for us.
Oh, where he's just like passing out. Yeah.
He's over there. Like his wrist is a little limp. His neck's a little limp. Even his spine is crooked.
Yeah, that is the most unnatural fall.
He's not right.
He's not right.
In many ways.
And St. Nicholas is firmly planted.
Mm-hmm.
He's a boss. He's an alpha.
Firmly planted in many ways.
In many ways. And then you look at over here at Ilya Repin's painting of St. Nicholas, which also has its own mockery and scorn built in, but that's another detail for another day. He did not think highly of the Roman involved, the Roman that falsely condemned these men. So different versions of the history of St. Nicholas is told. Some specify that these are soldiers that were falsely accused by one of their commanders. We don't know the exact detail, but we do know that St. Nicholas stepped in to save the life of 3 men who were innocent of what they were accused of. And they were about to be executed, and there's a crowd around them. And St. Nicholas passes through the crowd, and he grabs the executioner's sword. He grabs it with his hands, like this is the historical accounts of this. He grabs it, snatches it away, and throws it down. Now, St. Nicholas is a bishop, so he has a lot of authority. And one of the things which is so bizarre about this is a man who's actually using the authority that's recognized by the world for the right purposes. Mm-hmm. Like, that's crazy. Like, he actually has the power to step in and stop this. And, like, by the law of the land, like, people have to respect him. But most people will sit silent. Most people will pull a Pontius Pilate and wring their little hands and be like, oh, the cost of defiance is too much. But St. Nicholas is like, nah, I'm going to go in here and sort this out. We're not killing these men for no reason. And he does this. The executioner complies. The men are allowed to go free, and they're forgiven. But there was pressure on St. Nicholas, even in that moment, not to do that. You can see that depicted here in the picture. But Nicholas is a boss. He's being very meek right now. Mm-hmm. He's being this is like true meekness right here, which this here is also meekness, by the way, punching Arius. But what you see here is a man who actually has control over his own character. Because he doesn't turn around and decapitate. He doesn't pull a Thulsa Doom from Conan and pretend like he's going to walk away. If you've seen the old Conan movie, terrible scene in the opening.
Sequence.
James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, also Mufasa, as the villain of Conan, he pretends like he's going to let this little boy and his mom go, and he kind of looks at him like all easy, and he turns around to go his way, but then swiftly jerks back around and decapitates this lady in front of her son, who's little Conan. And it's wicked. St. Nicholas could have done that. He could have totally pretended like he was going to be all peaceful and just turn around and then decapitate some of these wicked thugs. But he doesn't do that. He actually has these men released, lets them go back to being innocent, clears their record, and just goes about his day, goes about his business. And that is such an awesome story. It's anger being used correctly in St. Nicholas's life, and it's just amazing. We should have a lot of gratitude for St. Nicholas. Any final thoughts on this before we roll along?
I just like how in this painting, he's grabbing it by the blade. Like, his hand's kind of near the hilt, but it's near the blade. And his other hand is like just kind of telling the guy calmly. And like you said, there's this meekness and this assurity and strength that is so calm, because then he's got the guy behind him yelling, and he's not even looking at the executioner or the guy yelling at him. He's kind of looking almost off into the distance as if there's something else that has his attention. Like, this is so not beneath him, but he is so in control. All these other things are just details.
I know,
It's
amazing.
And I think that's the thing. Like, we talk about belief, or even like the story of Peter walking on water, where Jesus tells him, you stopped looking at me, you looked at the waves. And we see that kind of in St. Nicholas. He's not looking at all the chaos. He knows what he believes. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. And that's it. That's all that matters. It's the sharp sword, the yelling guy. None of this matters because he's doing what needs to be done. It's amazing.
And Ilya Repin, the Russian painter, who is amazing. Like, it's almost unbelievable. These are paintings. And we in the modern world, we're bombarded with images of people. If you're watching this online on Facebook, you're seeing like images of us, though we're not really in the TV screen, obviously. We're real people in a old Sunday school classroom converted into chord purgatory, the second layer of chord purgatory. We
moved one up.
Moving up. But to actually capture this level of human emotion,
mm-hmm.
and to do so, I mean, he didn't go and recreate this scene where there are, other people in costume doing all this stuff. Like, he was able to generate a lot of this out of his mind, and to understand human anatomy that well, to understand emotions that well, even to see this painting of Ivan the Terrible holding his son, to put things like this together. Even down to the vein that's like swollen on Ivan the Terrible's face. This is just crazy. The amount of talent behind this is unreal. And this is what God actually made us to do, for the record. So be encouraged. Be encouraged. Go out and do talented things. Aspire. We're going to get into some creativity in our next segment. But the main walkaway we have is, don't be like Ivan the Terrible. That is anger, as we typically do as fallen, degenerate sinners. We actually have to put that emotion in its correct place, as Paul instructs us to in Ephesians 4. Be like St. Nicholas. That's who you want to be. St. Nicholas is great. Why? Because St. Nicholas is being Christ-like. We see a lot of Christian attributes there. So, alrighty. We'll be back in a moment to play a game. We're going to go from something very serious to something very, very fun. So we'll be back. Thank you. All right, we are coming back. If I can run the keyboard and all the controls around here. So thank you for joining us here at Kingdom of the Logos. We're going to play a game, Hot, Not, or Sanctified. And we've done this before in the past, but we're going to have different rules now. So how this is going to work is hot means you like it,
mm-hmm.
not means you don't, and sanctified means, oh, you really like it. Like,
okay.
It's spot on. And we're going to be looking at some Christmas treats that I have come up with. In Proverbs 26, verse 4, it says, "Do not answer fools according to their folly, lest you become like them." One of the problems we have in the church is we basically respond to issues in the world rather than being proactive in creating our own culture, to be people who really create and do a lot of original stuff. A lot of time we just frame ourselves in answer to the culture. But that has not always been the case. I mean, you look at the great sciences, you look at the great arts, you look at things over the Renaissance period, you see these art products coming out of the church. You see the great traditions we've had, even creating the liturgical calendar, giving feast days and partitioning these things out, really aspirational stuff. We need to get back to doing that. So it's the Advent season. We're getting close to Christmas. And a lot of people are going to have little treats around. I have a list of 10 treats that I have thought of myself. And they're to represent different aspects of the birth of Christ and the events surrounding. And they're going to have some special taste to represent them. They are meant to be sweet treats, though.
Okay.
So I'm going to let Amanda and Mike rate these as hot, not, or sanctified.
Okay.
So are y'all ready for this?
Yes.
Alrighty. So coming in at number 10, representing Zachariah and Elizabeth, we're going to have a special candy rope to design them. So if you've ever ate something like a cow tail or some of the caramel rolls that are rolled up with powdered sugar inside of them, in the story of Zachariah and Elizabeth, Zachariah, his faith flinches when he finds out from Gabriel they're going to have a son. So we have a rope that is basically, you take out a sheet of caramel, and on the caramel, you are going to pour some cinnamon, like raw cinnamon. And then you're going to roll that up into something little bit bigger than the straw, about the size of a cow tail. But inside of it, rather than having the powdered sugar, you have cinnamon. So it's caramel and sweet, but it has that terribly bitter cinnamon in there. And this is because Zechariah had his mouth sealed up. He could not talk for 9 months. And this should seal up everybody's mouth when it sucks all the moisture out of you. So the cinnamon rope for Zechariah, and also Zechariah is a priest. And sometimes they would tie a rope to the priest in case they died in the Holy of Holies and pull him out. So representing Zechariah getting his mouth sealed up, we have the cinnamon rope. Alrighty.
I say hot as far as like concept wise, but I would never eat that. But I'll still give it a hot.
You're gonna give it. I was actually gonna make some of these for us next week. But if you're saying hot rather than sanctified, I'll hold on. Pastor Mike, the cinnamon rope.
I'm stuck somewhere between hot and sanctified, but I'm gonna go with hot. I do like the idea that cinnamon does have a little bit of heat at some point.
Yeah.
So I like this. This is a very good Advent treat.
So,
and I don't know if I even call it a treat, but I think it's something that can help us remind. So, I'm going to bump that up to sanctified.
So you like
because it's not just the treat itself; it is your expression of what it represents. And for that, I'm gonna bump it on up.
And if you make it right. If you are sparing enough with the cinnamon, if you can get the right recipe, I think it could be edible. Like you could actually eat it and enjoy it. I like cinnamon. I mean, I don't eat a spoonful of cinnamon because nobody.
We've all learned from that back a couple years ago.
Moderation, self-control.
But I like it. So y'all, let's keep going.
All
right. This one is a little bit more severe.
Okay.
So this is regarding Herod. So a lot of people like Rice Krispie treats around Christmas time. And this needs to be to represent Herod. We should make some cereal treats, but you have to make them with an unlikely cereal. And that's because when the wise men left, they weren't able to go the route back as planned. They had to go a different route. So I think we should make cereal treats, but whatever your household doesn't eat as far as cereal, whatever is the least likely cereal, pick that out and go with it. I would have to pick something like Apple Jacks because I don't ever eat Apple Jacks. I think I've had one box of Apple Jacks in my entire life. But Rice Krispie type treats, but using an unlikely cereal. And when your kids ask or people ask, like, why did you have like Apple Jack treats sitting around? Be like, well, because the wise men couldn't go the route planned. You had to go a different way. So we had to pick a different cereal. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like your concept on that. I would definitely, though, enjoy an Applejack crispy treat, so that sounds good. If I were to pick something, I would, like, it would be like a Raisin Bran or just like the kashi or whole grain cereals that people only eat when they pretend to be healthy. Like, that's kind of nonsense I'd have to make mine with. But no, I like the idea. I'm going to give it sanctified.
Okay.
I really like it.
Mike?
I'm going to go with the not. And it's because I would like to adjust it to maybe it's not one of your staples that you like, but there has to be something enjoyable and appreciative of it. And so, I don't know, maybe you splurge instead. Maybe you get, maybe we eat regular Cheerios or something. We move to Cocoa Puffs or something that is totally different. It's totally different from Rice Krispies or anything, but it is something that sits well. Not because we want to see how it sits badly with Herod, but how it sits well with the coming of Christ and the obedience of the wise men.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it a not unless I can adjust it.
And for the record, I was going to originally hypothesize this using Cheerios because of the children who died.
And the circle coming back a different way.
We shouldn't celebrate the children who died at all.
No.
So the purpose of this treat is to talk about the wise men going another way home, and then we teach the lesson of how evil it was what Herod did. Yeah. All right, next up we have Simeon and Anna. And these are a prophetess, a holy man there in Jerusalem. They get to see the Christ child, and it's an amazing thing for them. And so the treat that we have for them are pretzel and licorice chocolate scrolls. So they have kind of a prophetic role, and so we often associate with prophets with scrolls. So basically what you need to do is get one of those stick pretzels and then get a piece of licorice, This can be a small pretzel stick and, say, a strip of like a peeling Twizzler, or it could be like a big Twizzler stick and a big pretzel. But take them and dip them in chocolate, but keep them together as a twin so they look like a scroll that's rolled up. And that just is the treat, the pretzel and licorice chocolate scrolls. Amanda's looking at me awful hard on that one. I thought it was really creative.
No, I applaud the concoction creativity. Those are two like many flavors. Chocolate and pretzels, yes, but licorice, oh. So
well,
I'm a little
like the red licorice.
Yeah, I don't even really like. I don't like any licorice though. So I might be the odd person out.
I love licorice.
I know. So I'm gonna go with hot because I agree with like kind of your concept. Again, I would not eat it. Maybe like oh, this would even be worse. But I'm thinking like what's the flat ones? Fruit roll-ups?
Yes.
Yeah, fruit roll-ups.
Yeah, do that with the pretzels to get your scroll.
Yeah,
and just don't do any chocolate. But I'll stay with hot.
Okay. Pastor Mike, real quick.
I go with sanctified.
You're going to go with sanctified.
And it has, I'm like Pastor Man, I'd probably rather have fruit roll-ups with it. But it is the meaning behind this that I cannot, I have to go sanctified because it does point you to this beautiful moment.
Mm.
All right. So the next one that I've got is for the wise men.
Okay.
Now, these are special brownies. They are
Yes.
brownies that have peppermint.
Okay.
They have caramel inside them, so peppermint and caramel, which is a bit of a lot flavors, but here's where it's really getting on top of there. And then also, there's going to be some cinnamon sugar sprinkled on top. So this has your gold, frankincense, and myrrh in there, kind of peppermint and cinnamon representing the spices, and the gold represented by the caramel inside the wise men. So Pastor Amanda, what do you think about that?
At first I was kind of confused by the peppermint and the peppermint and caramel, but I would be willing to try it. I like, and again, I like the concept because the cinnamon and the peppermint, you've got kind of frankincense and myrrh. I guess the caramel's the gold. I don't know, but
yes, the caramel is meant to be the gold.
I like the construction, so I'll go with sanctified on these. Also, like you have to try really hard to ruin a brownie, so.
That's true. And I realized opening up when I said special brownies, a lot of people think of drugs when that is not what I meant. Over here. Holiness
That's a
people.
different kind of frankincense and myrrh, but all right.
Well, I will say, when I was coming up with this one, the cinnamon on top, I almost said to put syrup on top. But that would have just been too sweet. I would have not been able to eat that. But the reason why is frankincense and myrrh are they're both spices. They kind of have their purpose as perfumes. They've got some applications and things with embalming and how you might entomb somebody. Mm-hmm. But they're also derived from saps. Mm-hmm. And so you got maple syrup, which comes from sap. But then you also have cinnamon, which comes from bark on trees. Mm. So I was trying to keep some of those elements in there, that they're a spice, like a peppermint is not really a spice, but it kind of has that sharp taste to it. It's got an air of that mintiness to it. So I was trying to go with that. I don't know if you think that kind of works, Amanda.
Yeah, that's what I really like how you've come with those, and I get the cinnamon, and I like you added those cinnamon sugar instead of just cinnamon, so it's a little bit sweeter, a little more indulgent than just cinnamon. But the bark and all that. So I think you've got some great connections.
Well, cinnamon has its very limited applications.
Yes.
Raw cinnamon can be a lot to take in.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, I was hoping we bought enough time for Pastor Mike to make it. He had to slip out for just a second.
We'll roll on.
So you gave us sanctified on that?
Yes.
Okay. Well then, wait.
All
right. So we're back. We're going to talk about the stable now because this is also another important part. Oh, there's Pastor Mike slipping back in. Did you hear the brownie, Pastor Mike?
Yeah.
With peppermint caramel and a touch of cinnamon on top?
Yeah, let me get over here. I think it's sanctified for sure.
You're saying sanctified on that?
Yeah, it goes directly in with the story, and it has meaning. And anytime we can experience all of those things, absolutely, the great joy of the coming of the Christ child.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Next up, to celebrate the stable.
Okay.
So a lot of people make haystacks, which is basically like a butterscotch lump with some type of cereal in it. Maybe it's got Chex in it. Maybe it's got just like cornflakes in it. Well, here's what I've got. Take your butterscotch and mix into it Chex, because it kind of looks a little bit like hay, something like that. Put your Chex in there and then also some M&Ms. Mix that together in the butterscotch, and then put that on top of a graham cracker. And this kind of represents an animal trough. And yes, I know the manger is an animal trough. We're going to get to the manger in a bit.
Okay.
I wanted something a little bit more special to represent baby Jesus in the manger. But here we've got your graham cracker with on top of it the butterscotch lump with Chex and M&Ms in it. So what do we think about that? Kind of represent the animals in there. You've got a variety of flavors and stuff in there. And it's just kind of animal mix.
Yeah, I like it. It's I think that's I would eat this one definitely too. So I'll give it a sanctified.
Okay.
Obviously, I like it, but I'm going to give it a sanctified as well. And with any of these that you have mentioned, I think what makes them sanctified is not just the eating, but the telling of the story of God at work. And with that, it has to be sanctified.
And you've tapped into the purpose of this. I want you out there as a listener to be encouraged, to be creative in ways to tell the biblical story this year, to create traditions within your family, to do some cool things to tell the story. So the next one I've got up is the shepherds. And to represent that the shepherds were called by the angels, get up and go over there and find about this Christ child, I've got peppermint sandal cookies. Yeah, you thought that it would involve the shepherd staffs, the candy canes. No, I'm cleverer than that. We're going to take those, and we're going to make sandals, cookies that look like sandals. And when people ask, why in the world do you have cookies that look like sandals? What is this, like Christmas in July, but actually in December? No, the answer is the shepherds, they had to walk. They had to walk over there and see the Christ child, and the Christ child was really there. So to represent the walking of the shepherds, we have the sandals.
I really like this, especially like this being a very kind of kinesthetic telling of the Christmas story. Decorating cookies is such a wonderful whole family activity, or even like if it's your family but you're all adults, like you don't have little kids, it still can be very interactive and fun. So I like the concept of being like, okay, we're gonna, instead of doing like an ugly sweater cookie decorating contest, you could do like just, you never would have thought to make sandal cookies, but why not? And or other kinds of elements of the Christmas story you wouldn't normally think of. So I really like, if I could give this one a level above sanctified, I would. I really like this idea.
So maybe we need to just reserve sanctified for that, which is really, really good.
Just like exceptionally good.
Yeah.
But I really like this one, yeah.
Pastor Mike?
I'll go with sanctified, and for a couple reasons here. It's because, the shepherds are really the first evangelists in the sense that they, as soon as they leave the stable, they start telling everyone. They are telling the good news, and blessed are the feet of those who carry the gospel, the good news. So I'm going to give it a sanctified. And again, the story behind this, when we eat something like that, it does remind us. Because of its oddity, and that's what makes it special. It's not something we have all the time, even though I guess we could. But Christmas comes, and this once a year we revisit it, and it makes it special.
So next up, to represent the angel, we have peanut butter chocolate hymnals. And so now how these are made is take your Hershey's bar and kind of break them off where you've got 3 of them together, and that's going to be the book cover for your hymnal. And you have 2 of them, 2 of your little 3 sections. And then you put peanut butter on there, but here's where you make it a little bit special. You're going to put some cinnamon on the peanut butter, just a little bit, just enough that you can detect it, but not so much that it really changes it. And then you just put it on top, and it's just a little tiny book like that. And when somebody eats it and they're like, oh, this has a flavor to it, you're like, oh, it's a hymnal. That little sweetness that you taste next to that sharpness of the cinnamon is reminding that song which came down from the heavenly host to talk about peace that was coming with the Christ child and the joy that would go across the world in that goodness of the gospel. So it's got some sharp to it, some surprise, but yet it is a nice little hymnal. So there's my angel representation. Peanut butter chocolate hymnals with a taste of cinnamon in there.
I like this one too. We've done a lot with cinnamon. I'm going to say hot, not because I don't like it. Just because I think, the sanctified is kind of like the extra like. So this one, it's good. It's very solid. And I think most people who like Reese's would really enjoy it. I like it. Yeah.
And yes, I am limited. I do like cinnamon. I actually do like cinnamon. So cinnamon crept in here. Pastor Mike.
Hark the herald angels sing.
Yeah, that's
glory to the newborn King. It is sanctified. I love it.
Okay.
Holy, holy, holy.
Okay. Well, next up, representing the star. This one's going to take a little bit of work. So what we're going to make is some star-shaped croissants. So take your croissant, and a lot of times if you buy some of the ones that are kind of rolled up and pre-made, they come out in little square sheets. So bunch that up, kind of the long sides of it, to where it looks like a 4-point star. That's a little bit hard to visualize, so don't pinch it at the corners, but in between the corners. Mm-hmm. And kind of have it where it has a little bit of a bowl in the middle is what you're going to want. And we're going to cook the croissant like that. But then inside that middle section there, you're going to put some lemon cream there in the very center of the croissant, that little bowl, the croissant bowl that we made. And you may have to make a little special tray for this, or maybe cook it upside down with something up under it. But you want the croissant bowl that's shaped like a star with lemon cream in the middle, and then cover the whole thing in powdered sugar. And that is my representation of the star.
The only thing I would change is get a puff pastry instead of a croissant, because they kind of come in these long rectangular shapes, and then you could cut it a little bit more specifically to the shape you want. And then take a muffin or a cupcake pan, flip it upside down, and you can make your bowls. So really, honestly, like, your idea is great. I would just those could be practical ways to change it up a little bit to get it done. But I love it. I'm going to put this one as sanctified.
You understand breads more than I do. I thought of the croissant because it's a little bit flaky and it can be a little bit sweet. But yeah, I like the improvement you made there on that. So okay, Pastor Mike.
The star leads the wise men to the Christ child, and I'm going to say this is sanctified all day long, because it's going to bring people to it. It's just my taste buds are watering over here right now.
Okay.
And I think also add a little, you can make some homemade whipped cream. And I don't know why that would be important to the story. That just sounds really good right now.
Okay, yeah.
I believe Pastor Amanda's star is sparkling with whipped cream.
With whipped cream, there you go.
And they do have powdered sugar.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Okay, so
good addition.
The next thing for Mary and Joseph, we have Bethlehem Bark. And now cinnamon is making its return here for this one.
All right.
So you've got your typical chocolate and almond bark. So you've just got a square like that. But I want you to cover that in a layer of cinnamon sugar that looks like sand. And you have to serve these in squares that are fairly large, because you want people to understand Mary and Joseph had to make a trip to Bethlehem. And you're eating a piece of real estate when you eat this. The almonds are representing the stones they had to walk across. Nestor, the long-eared Christmas donkey, had to step over some stones, being represented by almonds, and the cinnamon sugar representing kind of the sand of the landscape that they had to traverse. So there's Mary and Joseph, Bethlehem Bark, to remind people of the journey they had to make.
Yeah, I think this one too is sanctified, because not just the journey to Bethlehem, but then the journey to Egypt that they will have to take, and the journey back then later on into Nazareth. So there's a lot of kind of really interesting things you can do with this as the path that they had to journey through. So sanctified, it's really cool.
Pastor Mike?
Sanctified, by all means.
All right, and now we're at number 1 on my list. Now this one is probably not going to look as good as I want it to look, but I had it here because I love one of the ingredients, and that's just how it is. So we've got to have something to represent baby Jesus, right? Okay. And we all know it's got to be some form of a manger. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to make is a Reese's pretzel manger. And now I've theorized in my brain a couple of ways you could do this. Like, you could obviously take some Reese's cups and use pretzel sticks to make stilts up under it and just have a little manger, and that would be totally delicious, but it wouldn't be so easy to pick up and hold and be unstable. So what I thought we need to do is we're going to get 4 little pretzel sticks, lay them down next to one another, nice and parallel, like a little raft, then take you just a little bit of icing and put over top of it, then take you one of the Reese's mini cups and flip it over and stick it down on the icing, then turn it over, and there's your little manger to represent Jesus. Because if anything came down from heaven that were food, it were Reese's peanut butter cups. And in the same way that Jesus came down from heaven as fully God, fully man, the Word of God incarnate, in the Word of God it is sweet, so is the Reese's peanut butter cup. So this is a little Reese's pretzel manger that has a little bit of icing on it, some pretzel sticks, so we've got some sweet and salty, and that delectable.
Yeah. And you could add like a little M&M on top to be baby Jesus.
Yeah, you could.
So I like this one too. This one's sanctified as well.
Pastor Mike?
Sanctified.
All right.
Sanctified.
What are y'all thinking about my list as a whole, these 10 items?
As a whole, I like the creativity and kind of the some of them were very like closely connected and some were a little more abstract, but I enjoy the thought that went into that. And like you said, this could be something, even if people don't do these specific tasks, they can begin thinking of what are some hands-on, tangible ways where everyone can gather around and have something to do with their hands, but also be in conversation and communication about the story of Christmas. Because I think sometimes like a lot of families are like, oh, our tradition is to read the Christmas story, and you can tell like the kids have opened their gifts, like their eyes are glossing over, like they at the moment they don't want to hear scripture being read. They want to go play with their toys, they want to go hang out with their cousins, like there's something they want to do. And so you could be like, all right, kids, and again, when I say kids, it could be grown adults, it does not matter the age, but you could say, okay, family, let's go around the dining room table or the kitchen table, and we're going to put together little baby Jesus mangers, or we're going to put together angel tarts, or just like whatever it is. And now they're involved in something, but they're also hearing the story. So I love that concept in general, which is something like the people of God have been doing for thousands of years, but we've got to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's exactly the whole purpose is just get back to doing this.
Yeah.
And again, some of these may not be up your alley. Some of these, somebody may want the cinnamon rope that represents Zechariah. But the purpose of this is to just encourage us to take the scriptures and read them and break up the scriptures and enjoy it and have a really tasty little treat with it. Pastor Mike, you like this list?
The whole list is sanctified. I'm
awesome.
I'm at the place where I want a copy of this. I'm going to ask you to get those in the comment section so others can get it, because this, the food itself may be tasty, it may be a little strange, may be different, but the story, the event that is being told, that is behind it, is what makes this so beautiful. And anytime we can use food to teach our children and encourage them and motivate them to know the story and the events that took place is just great.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining us. We've gone really long today, but God love you and have a blessed day.